The Holy Gospel according to St. Luke, the 18th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Then Jesus told them a parable about their need to pray always and not to lose heart. He said, "In a certain city there was a judge who neither feared God nor had respect for people. In that city there was a widow who kept coming to him and saying, 'Grant me justice against my opponent.' For a while he refused. But later he said to himself, 'Though I have no fear of God and no respect for anyone, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will grant her justice, so that she may not wear me out by continually coming.' And the Lord said, 'Listen to what the unjust judge says. And will not God grant justice to those chosen ones who cry to him day and night? Will he delay long in helping them? I tell you, he will quickly grant justice to them. And yet, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth?'" The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
You may be seated. Another parable, right? And this one comes with a disclaimer. A reminder that a parable is a made-up story in order to teach some kind of deeper meaning. And we have today a story of a judge who doesn't care about God or other people, a leader in power that seems to only care about himself, and a widow who in society had no power at all, could not vote, could not have any say in politics, could not own land, had no voice, no authority. The judge has no reason to listen to what she has to say at all. He cannot gain or profit from listening to her at all. And yet, she continues to come to him day after day till she wears him down like a child to an adult, until the leader, the unjust judge, finally gives in just to have peace from the woman, from the widow. And God says, will not God be just immediately? Right? Unlike the just judge, would not God be just immediately? So shouldn't we, in fact, go to God right away and expect better than the widow can expect from the judge? Ask those questions and we are to consider them. Now, this parable, unlike most, gives us a disclaimer at the beginning of the parable. And the disclaimer is, this parable is about persistence in prayer. Persistence in prayer. And Jesus told the disciples this parable so that they would not lose faith and they would maintain prayer and persistence. Okay, so the topic, we get a hint, is about prayer. And that reminded me of a story of the power of prayer that I have experienced recently with our church council. As most of you know, for the first 6 months of the year, I continue to impress upon the congregation the need to bring someone to worship. Bring someone to worship, and in my mind, that was to grow attendance and involvement in the community of faith. And some of you have, and I appreciate that. But ironically, our average attendance is down compared to last year. So on the first 6 months of appealing to bring people, let's grow attendance, our attendance is actually down. So we were discussing this at church council. Our attendance is down. This appeal is not working. What's some other things that we could do? And in the midst of conversation and I can't remember if it was Don Stovey or Ken Gearing, or maybe the two of them together, got us to the point where they basically said, well, maybe we should pray. Oh, well, okay. That should have been the pastor's idea, but it's a good thing there's faithful people in council. Maybe we should pray, right? Okay, so we prayed. That made sense. We prayed that God would bring him into worship. And you know, wouldn't you know it? The next Sunday, we had 3 visitors. The next Sunday, 3 visitors showed up in worship. It was almost as if God was saying, yeah, you can keep doing it your way as long as you want. But when you'd like to bring in the big guns, when you'd like help, just let me know and I'll send them your way. Just waiting on us to extend an invitation to God, for God to get involved, for God to engage that process. You know, another story that I'm reminded of a need for prayer. I was in high school at the time, and it was my senior year, and you had to give a senior project. And so I gave a presentation to 3 community leaders as to what I would like to do as my senior project. And they listened, they heard it, and they said, yeah, that sounds good. And I thought, good. I went and sat down, and my teacher stood up and said, don't you think he could do better? I was not very happy about it. Needless to say, the committee then decided, yeah, let's have him represent to us at a later date with a better presentation or with a better idea. And I was just really upset about it, stomping around, fuming about it. I went home, I had a bad attitude all day into the evening, and I was sitting in my room pouting at one point, and my mom came in and said, son, I have no idea what's going on. I didn't tell her anything. I've got no idea what's going on, but maybe you should pray about it. Are we noticing a theme here, your pastor in prayer? Whew, man, we preach best, but we need most, huh? Maybe you should pray about it, son. And so I did. I prayed about it. And you know, I felt something right away. Because prayer, I don't want to give the impression that prayer is like a magic genie. That we rub the Bible and say a prayer, and God pops out and goes, yes, master. No, that's not how it works. No, there's something about prayer, about being in communication with God, that changes the one praying. Changes the one praying. And that night, when I prayed to God, to strike my teacher with lightning, something changed in me, right? I realized that I was being a fool. I realized that I wasn't alone, that it wasn't my job to overcome this, that God was at work in this in some ways beyond, and that I needed to let it go. I needed to let it go and move on. And sometimes in prayer, the power of prayer is not that you get your wish. It's in the process of praying that you're changed. And in the process of prayer and praying, you begin to realize that you might not be in control and that someone else might be. And that someone else knows better than you do. Another example of this to me was in the notion of education. Now, I grew up with the assumption that I went to school in order to become something, right? So school was a means to an end. I went to school so that I could get in college or get a job or become productive in society. School was merely a stepping stone to something else. Education, merely a stepping stone to something else. And it wasn't until I was out of school that I realized the value of education in and of itself. In and of itself. That learning and growing and challenging ourselves is part of being human. And that education, when done well, is a lifelong endeavor to grow and learn. Yeah, it's a stepping stool too. And don't get me wrong, there are teachers and classes which are just hoops you got to get through. Don't get me wrong. But education in and of itself, the process of learning changes us, makes us into the kind of thing that we become. And so is it true with prayer. That it's not about the end goal. It's not about getting what we want. It's about being in relationship with God, in communication with God. If you've ever been in a relationship where the other person doesn't ever talk to you, it is hard to be in a relationship like that. Is that what we do to God? We have got to be in conversation, in dialogue with God. So it always deeply troubles me when I hear people say, I don't pray. I go, oh, man, shucks. Because it's not about getting what you want. It's about being in dialogue with God, and someday I hope that pastor as intercessor is obsolete. And that the people of God pray to God directly and often, in fact, all the time. Because prayer changes the one who prays. It reminds us that we are not in control and that there is one who is greater than us, who is. And our perception of how we look at the world, how we engage the world, is changed in this process. So I would be amiss today if I didn't invite us to, in fact, pray. To do that. So, before we do the hymn of the day, give us a couple extra minutes, Bill. Before we do the hymn of the day, I'm going to invite you to pray just silently to yourself. You can lift up any petition you want, anything that's on your heart, anything that's on your mind, something that's not on your heart and mind. You know, a go-to prayer for me is I pray that God make me a better man, a better husband, a better father, and a better pastor. Because those people I am charged with a level of responsibility for. And I hope that God does something through me to make a difference in their life. So if you need an example, go with that. Who do you care for in your life? Who are you responsible for in your life? Pray for them. And then also, I encourage, pray for yourself. Pray for yourself. Sometimes in prayer, well, maybe you've had this in general, where you've had a thought and then you said it out loud and realized just how foolish the idea really is, right? You had a thought, you said it out loud and went, oh man, I wish I could take that one back, because that was not a great one. Maybe sometimes in prayer, that's precisely what happens. We ask God for $1 million and go, oh, maybe that can be redirected to something better. So, 2 minutes. I invite you to pray quietly to yourself. If closing your eyes and folding your hands helps so you don't get distracted, do it. If raising your head and your hands in the air helps, then do that too. Whatever helps, I invite you to spend the next couple minutes in prayer, and then we will sing the hymn of the day.